The multi-billion-dollar lie.
Last Tuesday morning, a 79-year-old man sat in a lawn chair on the banks of Lake Texoma, Oklahoma. No trolling motor, no graph, no glowing screen on his bow. Just a steel hook, a few inches of copper wire, and a scrap of zinc he bought for 37 cents. By noon, he had 11 fish on the stringer. 30 yards away, a guy in a $60,000 skeeter, rigged with Garmin LiveScope, a lithium bank, and enough electronics to land a plane, had 4. That old man's name is Vernon Cole, and for 30 years he kept his secret locked inside his tackle box. Today, we're picking that lock wide open. Now, if you've been fishing in America for any amount of time, you already know what the industry wants from you. Walk into any Bass Pro, any Cabela's, any big box tackle shop and look around. Flashing screens, robotic arms, transducers that cost more than your first truck. The global fishing tackle market pulls in over $12 billion a year. $12 billion. And the giants sitting at the top of that mountain, the companies pushing Chirp Sonar, Active Target, LiveScope, they survive on one business model, making sure you, the American angler, stay on a never-ending upgrade treadmill. $300 this year, $800 next year, $3,000 the year after that. New firmware, new battery pack, new proprietary screen that doesn't talk to the old one. They want you dependent. They need you dependent. But what if I told you the most powerful fish-attracting technology on this planet doesn't need a battery, doesn't need a screen, doesn't need a software update, doesn't even need to be plugged in? What if I told you it was invented 4,000 years before LiveScope existed? The ancient Egyptians buried copper hooks alongside their pharaohs, not as decoration, but as tools for the afterlife. The Greeks used copper-rigged tackle to dominate the Mediterranean. The Romans engineered it into every piece of aquatic gear their empire ever built. For millennia, 2 simple metals and a body of water were all humanity needed to drag monsters out of the deep. And then, the modern fishing industry decided you should never learn about this. Not because it failed, because it worked too well, and it cost too little for anyone to make a profit. Welcome back to Forbidden Lures. I'm your host, and today we are pulling back the curtain on the biggest scam in the fishing industry. We are going to build what's called the Earth Lure. I'm going to show you, step by step, how a piece of scrap copper and a zinc washer, total cost $5, can generate a bioelectric field so powerful that predatory fish abandon their survival instincts and swim straight into your hook. We're going to break down the real science, the biology of how fish actually hunt, and the exact method to rig this yourself before your next trip. And yes, we're going to talk about why the corporate suits in their air-conditioned boardrooms are losing sleep over the fact that this information is getting out. Strap in. This is going to change the way you fish forever. But first, before we build anything, we need to understand the trap. Part 1. The Electronic Fish Finder Illusion. Let me ask you something. How much money is sitting on your bow right now? Forward-facing sonar, FFS, has completely taken over tournament fishing. Garmin LiveScope, Lowrance Active Target 2, Humminbird Mega Live. The industry tells you, straight to your face, that you cannot compete in a local bass tournament, that you can't track a suspended crappie, that you can't even call yourself a serious angler without a high-definition, real-time acoustic imaging system bolted to your boat. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. These machines are impressive pieces of technology. They fire high-intensity sound waves into the water column. Those waves bounce off fish, specifically off their swim bladders, and return an image to your screen. You see where the fish are in real time. That's real. That works. But here's the dirty little secret they will never, ever print on the box. Seeing a fish does not make it bite. Let me say that again, because this is the sentence the entire sonar industry prays you never think about. Seeing a fish does not make it bite. You're spending hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars on a tool that shows you a fish that might completely ignore everything you throw at it. And it gets worse. Professional commercial fishermen and marine biologists have documented that the acoustic ping of a powerful sonar transducer, we're talking 1,000 watts of sound energy screaming into the water, can actually spook pressured fish. You are blasting a sonic alarm into their living room and then wondering why they won't eat. Now here's where things get interesting. Because the earth lure doesn't work like sonar, it's not even in the same category. Sonar is an observational tool. It shows you where fish are. The earth lure is an active attractant. It doesn't show you where the fish are. It physically pulls the fish out of the surrounding water and drags them straight to your hook. No ping, no sound. Total silence. It speaks the electromagnetic language that fish have been listening to for 400 million years. The industry wants you playing a video game on a 10-inch LCD screen. Nature wants you to ring the dinner bell. So let's talk about how that bell actually works and why every predator in the water is hardwired to answer it. Part 2. The biology of the bite. How fish really see. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're blindfolded. Pitch black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. But somewhere, 20 feet away, someone just lit a match. You can't see the flame, but you feel the heat on your skin, instantly, automatically. You don't choose to feel it. Your nervous system detects it before your brain even registers what happened. That is exactly what happens inside the skull of a catfish when a wounded bait fish enters the water. See, we're visual creatures. We humans rely on our eyes for almost everything. But in the murky, tannin-stained rivers of the American South, in the muddy tidal waters of the coast, in 30 feet of stained reservoir water at midnight, vision is useless. Fish figured that out 400 million years ago. They evolved something better: electroreception. Every living thing in the water, every single aquatic organism emits a faint electrical field. It's an unavoidable byproduct of being alive. Every time a bait fish moves its gills to breathe, every time it twitches a muscle, its body leaks ions, sodium, chloride, into the surrounding water. That leakage creates a weak, steady electrical signal. In a healthy, resting bait fish, that signal measures roughly 500 microvolts. Faint, quiet, background noise. But here's where nature gets brutal. When that bait fish gets hurt, when a predator takes a chunk out of it, when it gets slashed by a rock, when the integrity of its skin gets breached, that electrical field doesn't just change, it explodes. The signal spikes to a full microvolt or more. And instead of a steady hum, it starts pulsing, erratically, frantically, 1 to 8 pulses per second. The electrical signature of panic, of bleeding, of dying. And every predator within range locks on like a heat-seeking missile. Species like sharks, rays, and catfish are loaded with specialized sensory organs, the ampullae of Lorenzini, or highly adapted tuberous receptors. Think of them as hundreds of tiny biological voltage meters embedded in their snouts and lateral lines. tiny jelly-filled pores. And the gel inside those pores? It conducts electricity at the exact same rate as the surrounding water, which means an electrical signal from 20 feet away arrives at the predator's nervous system without losing a single microvolt of power. It's like plugging directly into the fish's brain. And here's the part that changes everything. They cannot ignore it. This isn't a choice. This isn't curiosity. When an electroreceptive predator picks up that 1 to 8 hertz pulse, the frequency of wounded prey, its hypothalamus fires an automatic motor response. The brain shuts down everything else. Fear, caution, self-preservation. Gone. The only thing left is the kill switch. So the question becomes very simple. If you can fake that exact electrical frequency, that 1 to 8 hertz death signal on your hook, you don't need to find the fish. The fish will find you. And that brings us to the chemistry, the part the industry doesn't want you to hear. Part 3. The chemistry of the earth lure. So how do we hack a fish's central nervous system without a single battery? We use chemistry, specifically a spontaneous redox reaction inside something called a galvanic cell. And if that sounds complicated, don't worry. I'm about to make this so simple your 12-year-old can build one at the kitchen table. Here's the principle. When you take two different metals with different electrode potentials, and you dunk them into an electrolyte, a chemical reaction starts automatically. No switch, no battery, no power source. It just happens. The water itself becomes the engine. Now pay attention, because this is where a trip to the hardware store turns into a biological weapon. Take a standard steel fishing hook. Wrap it with bare copper wire. You've just created what's called a galvanic couple. Copper is more noble than steel on the electrochemical series. That just means it holds on to its electrons harder. So the moment both metals hit the water, electrons are forced to flow continuously from the steel to the copper. That flow generates a persistent electrical microcurrent. How much? 0.3 volts. Now remember, a fish can detect changes as small as 1 single microvolt, 1/1,000,000th of a volt. Your copper-wrapped hook is pumping out 300,000 microvolts. To a catfish, that's not a whisper. That's a floodlight in a dark room. But 0.3 volts is just the appetizer. If you want to simulate a bleeding, dying baitfish, the real death signal, you need a third metal. And this is the ingredient that turns good into devastating. Zinc. Zinc sits much lower than copper on the electrochemical series. When you add zinc to that same hook, copper on one side, zinc on the other, both touching steel, both submerged in water, the zinc becomes what's called a sacrificial anode. It starts hemorrhaging electrons into the copper cathode in a violent, continuous cascade. Here's what happens to the voltage. Copper and steel alone, 0.3 volts. Zinc and steel alone, 0.6 volts. But zinc and copper together, 0.9 volts. 900,000 microvolts radiating off your hook, into the water, in every direction. But voltage alone isn't enough. Here's the part that made me sit down when I first learned it. This triple metal reaction doesn't create a flat, static electrical field. The interaction between these three metals in water produces a multi-frequency field that naturally pulses at, are you ready? 1 to 8 hertz. 1 to 8 hertz. The exact electrical frequency of a wounded, dying prey animal. The fish's brain literally cannot tell the difference between the galvanic signal coming off your hook and the biological signal of real, bleeding food. You have just built a perfect counterfeit death signal for $5. And this isn't theoretical. Researchers at Texas A&M confirmed it in controlled tank studies. A standard hook wrapped with copper alone attracted fish from 12 feet away, but a hook rigged with copper and zinc, 20 feet. You nearly double your strike zone by adding a piece of metal that costs a dime. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, this sounds great in a lab, but does it work on real water, with real fish, under real conditions? One man spent 30 years answering that question, and the answer almost never got out.
Part 4. Vernon Cole and the Lake Texoma Experiments.
I told you about Vernon Cole at the top of this video. Now let me tell you his story, because this is the part that should make you furious. Vernon is 79 years old. He lives near Lake Texoma on the Oklahoma-Texas border. He fishes that lake 5 days a week. Rain, wind, 100-degree heat, doesn't matter. He's been doing this for over 2 decades. The man lives to fish. But before he retired, Vernon spent his entire career working at a zinc smelter in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And in the smelting industry, you learn one thing very fast. If you make a mistake combining dissimilar metals, you don't get a bad weld, you get a catastrophic fire. Vernon understood galvanic reactions, the way different metals interact in the presence of an electrolyte, better than most PhD chemists on the planet. So when he retired in the year 2000 and started fishing full-time, he did what any good engineer would do. He looked at his tackle box, he looked at his knowledge, and he asked a very dangerous question. What if I used this? That question became the Earth Lure. And for 30 years, Vernon kept it entirely to himself. But Vernon wasn't just using it, he was testing it, rigorously, scientifically, the way a metallurgist thinks, with data, controls, and variables. He ran a 6-month head-to-head field study on Lake Texoma. 2 rods, same water, same day, same conditions. On one rod, a $300 commercial electronic fish attractor. On the other, his homemade Earth Lure, a steel hook, a few wraps of 14-gauge copper wire, a tiny strip of zinc. Total cost? Under $5. 6 months later, he tallied the numbers, and what he saw made him sit down. The $300 electronic attractor averaged 4.2 fish per trip. Vernon's Earth Lure averaged 11.7 fish per trip, nearly 3 times the catch rate, at 1.7% of the cost, on the same water, on the same days. When Vernon sent his logs to a retired fisheries biologist for verification, the biologist confirmed the numbers. Then he asked Vernon the obvious question. Why haven't you published this? Vernon paused. Publishing would just help the industry figure out how to stop it. Let that sink in. A man sat on the greatest fishing hack of the modern era for 3 decades, not because he didn't trust the science, but because he didn't trust the industry. And honestly, looking at how the tackle business operates, I don't blame him. But the secret is out now. So let's talk about which fish this actually works on and which ones it doesn't. Because I'm not going to lie to you, and that honesty is what separates us from the guys selling garbage on late-night infomercials. Part 5. The Species Hit List. The Brutal Truth. At Forbidden Lures, we don't peddle snake oil. We don't sell magic beans. And we don't tell you a lure catches everything, because if someone tells you that, they are lying to your face. Remember that ridiculous twitching lure garbage? Yeah, we're not doing that. The Earth Lure is devastating, but it is not universal. Its effectiveness depends entirely on the biology of the species you're targeting. So let's go through the hit list, species by species, and I'll give you the brutal, honest truth. Let's start with the undisputed king of galvanic detection, channel catfish. If you are a catfish angler and you are not doing this, you are leaving fish in the water. Period. A catfish's barbels, those whiskers, are packed with over 20,000 electroreceptor cells per square inch. That is an insane density of electrical sensors. Vernon Cole noted that channel cats, blue cats, and flatheads hit his galvanic hooks harder and faster than they hit live bait. Live bait. The signal reaches them from 20 feet out in pitch-black, zero-visibility muddy water. If you fish for catfish, this is not optional. This is mandatory. Carp. Carp are incredible galvanic detectors, and nobody talks about it. A simple earth lure hook tipped with sweet corn will get crushed faster than any commercial carp rig on the market. Euro carp anglers, pay attention. Salmon and trout, highly responsive. In fact, commercial salmon trollers in the Pacific Northwest have been using electronic black boxes for decades to positively charge their downrigger cables. They know, from generations of experience on the water, that salmon instinctively follow a positively charged water column because it mimics the electrical signature of a baitfish school. This isn't new to them, it's just new to you. Crappie. Massive. 52% increase in open water strike rates when targeted with the earth lure. 52%. The trick with crappie is scaling down. Use thin, 20-gauge copper wire so you don't weigh down those light jigs. Finesse matters here. Striped bass and river species. Outstanding response. And here's a bonus that most people don't realize. Moving water, the physical current of a river flowing over the metals, actually amplifies the galvanic signal and pushes it downstream. The river does the work for you. You're literally broadcasting a distress signal into the current and letting it drift into every hole and eddy below you. Now, I know what half of you have been waiting for. What about largemouth? I'm sorry, brother, I'm about to disappoint you. Largemouth bass show almost zero meaningful response to galvanic configurations. Why? Because largemouth are visual ambush predators. They hunt with their eyes. They trigger on water displacement, erratic movement, vibration, flash. They evolved to chase things that look alive and panicked, not things that emit low-voltage electricity. If you're a tournament angler fishing exclusively for largemouth in heavy cover, this copper and zinc trick is not going to move the needle. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but knowing what doesn't work is what separates a real angler from a guy who buys everything he sees on Instagram. Now, are you ready to build one? Part 6. How to build the Forbidden Earth Lure. All right, grab a pen. This is the part you came here for. This is Vernon Cole's Earth Lure, and you can build it for under $5 with one trip to the hardware store. Go to the electrical aisle. Buy a spool of 14-gauge bare copper wire. Bare, not insulated. The metal has to touch the water directly. That's non-negotiable. Next, walk to the fastener aisle. Buy a small strip of pure zinc or a handful of raw zinc washers. If you're resourceful, you can harvest pure zinc from the casing of a heavy-duty non-alkaline D-cell battery, but buying it is easier and cleaner. Here's the build. 4 steps. Step 1. Cut about 4 inches of bare copper wire. Step 2. Take your steel fishing hook. Wrap the copper wire tightly around the shank. 5 wraps, not 4, not 6, 5. That's the number Vernon dialed in after years of testing.
Step 3 is a tiny 1-inch
Step 3.
strip of zinc.
Cut a tiny 1-inch strip of zinc.
Rather than overpowering
Step 4. Pinch or crimp that zinc strip tightly onto the shank of the hook, right above the copper wrapping. Make sure it's making solid metal-to-metal contact. That's it. You just built a triple-junction galvanic cell. You just built the Earth Lure. But listen carefully, because deployment is where most people screw this up. Before you cast, you must wet the entire hook assembly in the water you are about to fish. Do not, I repeat, do not activate this thing in tap water at home. Tap water has a completely different mineral and chloride profile than natural lake or river or ocean water. You want the galvanic reaction calibrated to the exact salinity and conductivity of your specific fishing spot. The water itself is part of the circuit. Once it's wet, take your thumbnail or the back of a pocket knife and scrape the copper wire once. One quick scrape. This step is non-negotiable. What you're doing is exposing fresh, unoxidized metal to the electrolyte, which jumpstarts the electron flow. Skip this step,
And you've got a dead piece of metal on your hook. Bait your hook as normal, cast it into open water, and know this: your hook is now broadcasting a multi-frequency distress signal in a 20-foot radius. Every electroreceptive predator in that zone just heard the dinner bell. One more thing: maintenance. This is critical, so don't skip this part. Galvanic reactions work by slowly oxidizing the zinc anode. Over time, across multiple trips, the metals will tarnish. Zinc oxide builds up on the surface, and that oxide layer acts as an insulator. It kills your voltage output. Your lure goes quiet. The fix is simple. Before every single fishing trip, take a piece of fine grit sandpaper, 360 or 400 grit, or the edge of your knife, and lightly scrape the copper and zinc surfaces until you see fresh, shiny metal. Keep the metals clean and the voltage stays high. Neglect this, and you're fishing with a paperweight. Now, you might be wondering, if this works so well, why isn't every tackle company in America selling it? The answer tells you everything you need to know about this industry. Part 7. Commercial Wars. Lure Charge versus Pro Troll. The industry isn't completely blind. A few rogue companies figured out the science, and what happened next is a war that most anglers have never heard of. If you troll for salmon or trout in the Pacific Northwest, you may have heard of the Pro Troll black box. It's an electronic device you mount on your boat. You hook it up to your downrigger cables, dial in a specific voltage, usually around 0.65 volts, and it charges the water column to attract fish. It works. Salmon guys have sworn by it for years. But the Pro Troll has a fatal flaw. It runs on a 9-volt battery. Batteries die, usually at the worst possible moment. Battery terminals corrode in salt water. And here's the biggest problem. The Pro Troll creates a centralized electrical field at your downrigger weight, but leaves your actual lures completely electrically dead. The fish gets pulled toward the weight, not toward the hook. That's a serious design gap. Enter the disruptor, Lure Charge. Designed by a fourth-generation commercial fisherman who grew up on the water, Lure Charge threw out the batteries entirely. They built a compact galvanic cell, the same dissimilar metal chemistry we've been talking about, that clips directly in line on your rig. No battery, no charging, no corrosion. It passively generates a steady 0.65 volt positive charge using nothing but chemistry and water. But Lure Charge didn't stop there. They created voltage-tuned spoons and hoochies. So instead of one centralized point of attraction at the heavy downrigger weight, the entire Lure Charge ecosystem creates a distributed galvanic field. The fish picks up the broad voltage signature of the black box, gets drawn into the spread, and then encounters intense, localized 0.65 volt hotspots coming off every individual spoon and lure in the array. It's like walking into a grocery store because you smell fresh bread, and then finding out every aisle has a free sample. This is the power of pure chemistry over fragile, battery-dependent electronics.
And it's exactly why the established tackle manufacturers are terrified. You cannot sell a monthly subscription for a zinc washer. You cannot build a software update for a piece of copper wire. The entire recurring revenue model collapses the moment anglers realize the science was free all along. But before you rush out and start wrapping every hook in your box, I owe you the full picture. Because there is a dark side to this, and I promised you the whole truth. Part 8. The Dark Side. Toxicity and the Law. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. If you trust me enough to watch this far, you deserve the honest conversation that nobody else in this space wants to have. Why does a galvanic lure eventually stop working? Because the zinc and copper are literally dissolving into the water. That's the reaction. That's how it generates voltage. The metals sacrifice themselves. And while copper is an essential trace nutrient in small amounts, in higher concentrations, dissolved copper, the cupric ion, is toxic to aquatic life. When cupric ions enter the water, they bind to the gills of fish. Copper disrupts the sodium channels in the gill tissue, causing a catastrophic loss of sodium balance. The fish suffocates. It dies of metabolic failure. Zinc does its own damage. It blocks calcium uptake, leading to oxidative stress and lethargy. And the danger is amplified dramatically in soft, fresh water. Soft water lacks the calcium and magnesium that naturally buffer heavy metals. Lethal thresholds for trout can be shockingly low, as little as 10 to 20 parts per billion in soft water. Studies using the biotic ligand model have shown that even sublethal copper exposure, an increase of just 2 parts per billion, can destroy a salmon's olfactory neurons, reducing its ability to smell predators by 50%. Think about that. You're not just catching fish. At scale, you could be crippling their survival systems. Now, let's put this in perspective. A single $5 earth lure leaching a few milligrams of zinc into a massive lake? That's a drop in the ocean, literally negligible. One angler using this responsibly is not going to hurt anything. But imagine if all 40 million anglers in America started dumping raw copper and zinc into every pond, creek, and reservoir in the country. At that scale, we're talking about ecological damage, real, measurable ecological damage. Regulatory agencies are already paying attention. States like New Hampshire, Maine, New York, and Massachusetts have heavily restricted or outright banned lead fishing sinkers and jigs weighing under 1 ounce. In New Hampshire alone, lead jigs account for 48% of adult loon mortality. Breaking that law carries a $250 fine per violation. And the legal landscape of fair chase is shifting fast. In Alaska, it's strictly illegal to use any artificial lure that emits light or sound. The state considers it unsporting. Could an active, voltage-emitting galvanic lure be classified as an illegal electronic device in the future? In states like Texas, the law is blunt. Any fishing method not explicitly listed as legal is prohibited. So yes, as this technology spreads, expect crackdowns. And I'll be real with you. The billion-dollar corporate tackle lobby will happily fund campaigns to outlaw DIY galvanic lures under the banner of environmental protection. Not because they care about the environment, because they want to protect their sonar sales. That's the game, and now you see it clearly. Use this responsibly. Respect your water. Protect the resource. Because the day we lose clean fisheries is the day none of this matters anymore.
Join the resistance. Here's where we are. The fishing industry wants you dependent. They want you staring at $3,000 screens. They want you buying batteries, charging cables, firmware updates. They want you helpless the moment a microchip fails. But for 4,000 years, from the tombs of the pharaohs to the fleets of the Mediterranean to a retired zinc smelter sitting on the banks of Lake Texoma, the real secret to catching fish has been written in the earth itself. Copper, zinc, steel, water. The science is settled. The history is undeniable. The data is overwhelming. Now you know. You can drive to the hardware store today, spend $5, and build a biological signal that speaks directly to the deepest, most ancient sensory systems of the fish you're targeting. A signal that 400 million years of evolution taught them they cannot ignore. Use this knowledge responsibly. Protect our waters. Maintain your gear. And the next time a guy in a $60,000 bass boat looks at your tackle box and laughs, just smile, because you know something he doesn't. If this changed the way you think about fishing, do me one favor. Send this video to one friend who's about to drop $300 on something they don't need. And if you want to keep learning the secrets the industry tries to bury, hit subscribe. Tap the notification bell, because this is just the beginning. I'm your host. Keep your hooks sharp. Keep your lines charged. This is Forbidden Lures, and we're just getting started.